Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the November 19th, 2018 meeting of the Shawnee Planning Commission. We'll start with roll call. Commissioner Montgomery.
Here.
Commissioner Roth is absent. Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Willoughby.
Here.
Commissioner Beanhoff.
Here.
Commissioner Busby is here. Commissioner Wise is absent. Commissioner Braley.
Here.
Commissioner Les Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Mudgett is absent. Commissioner John Smith.
Here.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The consent agenda items 1 through 6 are listed under the consent items agenda. Unless there's a request to remove one of these items from the consent agenda, the items will be approved in one motion. Is there a request to remove any of the items from the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Commissioner Braley?
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda items with staff recommendations.
Is there a second? Commissioner Les Smith?
Second.
Motion and second to approve the consent agenda per staff recommendations. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. New business. If you're here just for the consent agenda, you can certainly leave now. New business. Z 0718-11 and pre-plat 131811 rezoning from agriculture to R1 single-family residential and preliminary plat approval for Bonson Estates, a single-family residential subdivision located at 5802 Lackman Road. Application is filed by Phelps Engineering Incorporated for Jeffrey and Julie Bonson, owner and developer. Mark?
Good evening, Mark Zilsdorf with the city staff. The applicant requests rezoning from agriculture to R1 single-family residential and a preliminary plat approval for Bonson Estates, a single-family residential subdivision. The property is located on the west side of the 5800 block of Lackman Road. The property is zoned agricultural, and rezoning to R1 is requested. The preliminary plat accompanying the rezoning request indicates the development of 3 lots on 7.58 acres, and the property is developed with the owner's existing single-family home. Surrounding land uses include single-family homes within the Whitwright subdivision adjacent to the south. The Whitwright subdivision is zoned residential suburban and contains residential lots ranging in size from 1.3 to 1.8 acres. Property to the west consists of 2 unplatted parcels that are zoned agricultural. These 2 parcels total approximately 10 acres and are developed with a single-family home on Lake Thomashaw. Property to the north also consists of 2 unplatted parcels zoned agricultural. Lackman Road, a designated major collector street, is adjacent to the east side of the subject property. And property east of Lackman Road is zoned R1 and developed with single-family homes of the Granite Falls subdivision. The land use guide of the comprehensive plan anticipates low-density residential development for this entire area. The plan defines low density as 1 to 5 dwelling units per acre. The plat provides 2 additional single-family lots to create an overall density of 0.4 dwelling units per acre. Therefore, the proposed use and density comply with the land use guide. Access will be from individual residential driveways to Lackman Road. Private driveways serve several residential properties along the west side of this segment of Lackman. Access is adequate for circulation and public safety purposes. All utilities, including public sanitary sewer, are available to the site. The character of the area will not change significantly with the rezoning, and it should have little, if any, detrimental effect on surrounding properties. The rezoning will allow for the creation of 2 additional residential lots in an area that has seen significant residential development over the past few years. The development of single-family homes is the appropriate land use for this area. And denial of the request would not appear to benefit the health and welfare of the community. The proposed development is compatible with existing and anticipated development patterns in the area. The plat consists of 3 lots on 7.58 acres. Lot 1 contains 5.92 acres with 80 foot of frontage along Lackman Road. This lot contains the applicant's existing single-family home. The existing home exceeds the minimum setback requirements of the R1 zoning district. Lot 2 contains 0.6 acres with 75 feet of frontage along Lackman, and Lot 3 contains 0.76 acres with 95 feet of frontage along Lackman Road. Front building setbacks are platted at 35 feet. The total width of both side yards shall be no less than 20% of the lot width, with no side yard less than 7 feet. Rear setbacks shall be 30 feet. All lots as shown on the plat exceed the minimum requirements of the R1 zoning district. As stated earlier, access to these lots will be by private residential driveways off of Lackman Road. And the proposed points of access are acceptable for circulation and public safety purposes. This final plat is for conveyance purposes. All street, storm, and streetlight public improvements have previously been constructed. Therefore, no additional public improvements are required. On-site detention is not mandatory because of the low impact of this development and because there are no known inadequacies within 1,000 feet downstream of the development. Accordingly, the applicant will comply with these regulations by paying a detention fee of $350 for each new lot created in lieu of constructing an on-site facility. This fee does not apply to Lot 1 since there is already a structure located on this lot. The applicant's engineer has provided a conceptual grading plan for the future homes on Lot 2 and 3. This conceptual grading plan includes a berm and swell along the south line of Lot 3. The owner of Lot 3, at the time the building permit is obtained, shall be responsible for the construction of the berm and swell as part of the final grading for the future home. Prior to occupancy of the future home, the berm and swell shall be constructed and shall be approved by city staff. This development is subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 12.26, which pertains to the city's excise tax on new subdivision plats. Lot 1 consists of land not previously platted that is improved with a permanent habitable structure built prior to July 1998 and therefore is exempt from the excise tax calculation. The excise tax does apply to lots 2 and 3. The estimated excise tax for this development is $12,838.38 based on an area of 59,713 square feet at the current rate of 21.5 cents per square foot. The developer may enter into an excise tax abatement agreement with the city that would allow for the suspension, partial or in full, of the excise tax that is due, provided the final plat is approved and recorded prior to the expiration of the suspension of the excise tax as set by the city. This agreement between the property owner and the city shall be created, agreed upon, and executed prior to obtaining the mayor's signature on the recording copy of the final plat. And this subdivision is subject to provisions of SMC 12.14, the Park and Recreational Land Use Fund, and open space fees in the amount of $400 per residential unit or $800 total shall be paid prior to issuance of a building permit. And Lot 1 is exempt from this requirement as it is already developed with an existing single-family home. As far as staff's recommendation, staff recommends approval of Z-07-18-11, rezoning from AG agricultural to R1 single-family residential, subject to the following condition. Number 1, approval of the rezoning by the City Council and publication of the rezoning ordinance as required by state statute. Staff also recommends approval of pre-plat -13-18-11 preliminary plat for Bonson Estates, subject to the following 14 conditions. Number 1, acceptance of the dedications on the final plat by the Shawnee governing body and recording of the final plat with the Johnson County Register of Deeds shall be completed prior to issuance of any building permits. 2, the plat contains 3 lots on 7.58 acres. 3, all bulk and use regulations of the R1 zoning district shall be met. 4, telephone, electric, and cable service facilities shall be placed within rear and side yards as required by policy statement PS 24. And all new site utilities shall be placed underground. Number 5, all disturbed areas in required front, side, and rear yard areas are required to be sodded in accordance with SMC 17.57. Number 6, all fire hydrants with compliant fire flows and fire lanes as required by the fire department shall be approved prior to issuance of a building permit. Minimum fire flow and flow duration shall be as specified in Table B 105.1 of the International Fire Code. Fire flow is measured at a 20 psi residual pressure. Number 7, this development is subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 11.20, land disturbance activity, which pertains to site grading and erosion control measures. 8, the applicant or landowner is responsible for obtaining a land disturbance permit as required by Codes Administration prior to undertaking any land disturbance or construction activities on the development site. 9, no public street improvements are required as part of this project. However, when a building permit is submitted for Lot 2, if the location of the proposed driveway conflicts with the existing ADA ramp, the owner of Lot 2 will be required to shift the ADA ramp south to avoid conflict with the new driveway. As part of relocating the ADA ramp, the owner is responsible for all required curb and sidewalk work on both the west and east side of Lackman Road to ensure the new ramp is ADA compliant and provides ADA access to the east side of the street. Number 10, this development is subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 11.24, stormwater detention, which pertains to the construction and maintenance of on-site stormwater detention facilities. The applicant will comply with these regulations by paying a detention fee of $350 for each new lot created in lieu of constructing an on-site detention facility. This site does not apply to Lot 1 since there is already a structure located on this lot, and the fee shall be paid at the time the building permit is obtained for Lots 2 and 3. Number 11, the owner of Lot 3, at the time a building permit is obtained for Lot 3, shall submit a plot plan that reflects the proposed berm and swale along the south property line. The owner shall be responsible for the construction of the berm and swale as part of the final grading for the home. Prior to occupancy of the future home, the berm and swale shall be constructed and approved by city staff. 12, provisions of the excise tax shall be satisfied prior to the mayor signing the recording copies of the final plat. The developer may enter into a developer's agreement with the city that would allow for the suspension, partial or in full, of the excise tax due, provided the final plat is approved and recorded prior to expiration of the suspension of the excise tax as set by the city. This agreement between the property owner and the city shall be created, agreed upon, and executed prior to obtaining the mayor's signature on the recording copy of the final plat. 13, open space fees in the amount of $400 per residential lot or $800, or the current open space fee rate in effect at the time a building permit is applied for, shall be paid prior to the issuance of a building permit as provided by SMC 1214. And number 14, the applicant is responsible for obtaining all such permits as may be required by all federal, state, and local agencies, including but not limited to Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Kansas Division of Water Resources, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That completes staff's presentation of that zoning case.
Thank you, Mark. Is the applicant present? If you'd come forward and state your name and address, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Jed Clausen with Phelps Engineering, 1270 North Winchester, Olathe, Kansas. I'm a civil engineer for my client, Mr. Banson. I'm here to just answer any questions you may have. I have nothing further to add to the staff report.
Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
We are.
My apologies, Mr. Banson. Got the name right now. Thank you. Bonson. Still screwing it up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Peterson.
This may be more of me understanding the map completely, but I know on the site number 2, it talked about the ADA ramp. They're talking about sidewalk ADA ramp, and is that the one that's roughly 20 feet from the south end of the, or where it 2 means 3?
Right in there.
Right in there, yeah, okay. So basically what you're saying is if they construct a driveway, they have to be cognizant of that and either move it or don't build their driveway there.
If the driveway has to go right where that sidewalk ramp is, then we agreed to the stipulation that we would replace the sidewalk ramp at a new location that would be approved by engineering.
Perfect. I have another question.
Go ahead.
I know that this road is asphalt. Where is it, if any, with the new development that is to the east of it, as well as what is going on in this area? Is it on for a street improvement situation or widening? Is it adequate to handle the traffic I understand we're talking about two lots here, but I know
Right.
there's
Mark
others.
Zilsdorf, city staff. Actually, Lackman Road is improved to a point basically to the north boundary of this property,
Of that section.
of this section. So
Okay.
everything from this development south out to Johnson Drive is fully improved.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Braley?
Again, I want to follow up to make sure I understand, I'm clear on the ADA ramp, because by looking at it, it seems like it's in alignment with a crossing from the neighborhood across the street, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The ADA ramp was put in place when they did improvements to Lackman Road on the south, or on the west side of the road. The issue previously, so this item was tabled 2 weeks ago, so the applicant could address, make some revisions to the plat. The previous version of this had the lot line between lots 2 and 3 located further south, which put basically that ADA ramp more in the middle of lot 2. And there was concerns by our engineering staff that they may want to place the driveway where the ADA ramp was located, just based on the size of the lot frontage. That has all shifted now. The ADA ramp has not moved, but the property line has moved closer to, the south property line of lot 2 has moved closer to the ADA ramp. So there's less likelihood that that driveway is going to, where they want to put that driveway will conflict with where that ramp's at.
Okay, so if we play that out and the driveway happens to go there and you relocate the ADA ramp,
Then
What-
they have to relocate the one that's on the east side of Lackman Road to match.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, then does anybody from the public wish to weigh in on this matter of the rezoning? Since I see no one standing up, then that would put us in commission discussion. With a lack of discussion, would somebody like to make a motion? And I believe since this is pretty straightforward, we can include both the zoning and the pre-plat in the same motion, or you prefer them be separate? Doug? Together would be fine? Then I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Les Smith?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move we approve Z071811 and pre-plat 131811 for Bonson Estates, 5802 Lackman Road, subject to staff recommendations.
Is there a second? Commissioner Peterson?
I second that motion.
There's a motion and a second to approve Z0718-11 and pre-plat 1318-11 rezoning from agriculture to R1 single family and preliminary plat approval for Bonson Estates. A single family subdivision located at 5802 Lackman Road. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda, Z08-18-11 and pre-plat 140811, rezoning from agriculture to duplex residential and preliminary plat approval for Subtle Woods, a duplex residential subdivision located at 7600 block of Monticello Road. Applicant is followed by Phelps Engineering for Sunshine Development Corporation. Mark.
Mark Zilsdorf again for city staff. The applicant requests approval of rezoning from AG Agricultural to DU Duplex Residential and preliminary plat approval for Subtle Woods. The property is located on the west side of the 7600 block of Monticello Road. The property is zoned AG Agricultural. Rezoning to duplex residential is requested. The preliminary plat accompanying the rezoning request indicates the development of 8 lots on 5.61 acres. The existing property is an unplatted parcel that is currently undeveloped, containing a mixture of trees and grassland. Surrounding land uses to the north include 2 large unplatted parcels of approximately 2 and 6 acres that are zoned agricultural and each developed with single-family homes fronting 75th Street. Monticello Road is adjacent to the east. Property east of Monticello Road is zoned agricultural and developed with single-family homes on large 5 to 6.4 acre lots. 2 of these lots are platted as Bicklemeyer subdivision, while the other remains unplatted. South of the subject property is a 1.9 acre property that is zoned agricultural and remains unplatted. This parcel is developed with a Water One water tower. Property to the west is zoned DU duplex residential and developed with a duplex residential subdivision of Settle Downs. The land use guide of the comprehensive plan designates the areas appropriate for medium-density residential uses. The proposed development is yielding an overall density of 2.85 dwelling units, which is under the medium-density designation of 5.1 to 10 dwelling units per acre. However, the provision of residential uses other than detached single-family homes is appropriate for the site. The lots provided are larger than the minimum required in the DU zoning district, and this multifamily development will be an extension of the adjacent existing Settle Downs duplex subdivision to the west. The lower density of this phase provides a transition to the existing and future single-family residential uses east of Monticello. The proposed use and density comply with the land use guide. Access to this subdivision will be from 76th Street through existing Settle Downs subdivision to the west. The applicant and city staff desired to have 76th Street, a designated local residential street, continue through with a connection to Monticello Road. However, due to the topography and significant existing infrastructure along the west side of Monticello, it was determined that this would not be possible. 76th Street will terminate in a permanent cul-de-sac. Private driveways from 76th Street will serve the lots within this development, and no access will be allowed from Monticello Road. Access is adequate for circulation and safety purposes. All utilities, including public sanitary sewer, are available to this site. The character of the area will not change significantly with the rezoning, and it should have little, if any, detrimental effect on surrounding properties. The rezoning will allow 8 more duplex lots to be added to an existing adjacent duplex residential subdivision. The city has anticipated that this property would eventually be an extension or an additional phase to the existing Settle Downs development. Denial of the request would not appear to benefit the health and welfare of the community. The proposed development is compatible with existing and anticipated development patterns in the area. As for the preliminary plat, the property is zoned ag with a request to be rezoned to DU for the development of a 5.61 acre 8-lot, 16-unit duplex residential subdivision. The applicant has provided architectural elevations of the duplex homes proposed to be built. The homes will be 2-story in design with a combination of hip and gable-style roofs. The front elevations will consist predominantly of stone and stucco elements with some lap siding. The side and rear elevations will consist of OSB masonite woodsman siding. And the same earth tone color palettes used in Settle Downs will be carried over into this new phase. These homes are different than the original models built in the adjacent Settle Downs, but are similar so that they blend in with the original development. The applicant has built several of this same design on the remaining lots of the original Settle Downs development. All bulk requirements have been satisfied. The plat consists of 8 lots and 1 tract on 5.61 acres. The lots range in size from 13,998 square feet to 27,700 square feet, exceeding the minimum lot size of the duplex zoning district. Minimum lot frontages of 90 feet are provided. Front yard setbacks of 30 feet are shown on the preliminary plat. Rear yard setback shall be 30 feet and side yard shall be no less than 10 feet. The applicant has indicated that the duplex units will be for sale units, and as such, the lots may be split one time upon completion of the duplex being built on the lot for the transfer of ownership in accordance with SMC Chapter 16.16. Tract A is located along the north side of the development. And is 39,267 square feet in size. It will contain a detention basin and stormwater treatment facility to serve the development. The tract will be owned and maintained by a homeowners association. The applicant has indicated that this development will be incorporated into the existing Settle Downs development and its homeowners association. The applicant shall prepare and submit the appropriate homeowners association declarations and any covenant and restriction declarations with submittal of the final plat. Public street improvements required for this development shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the standards of the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual. The conceptual street layouts provided are sufficient, as are the proposed centerline grades and vertical curve information provided with the preliminary plat. The preliminary plat for this development included a preliminary storm drainage study. Although the study is adequate for reviewing the preliminary plat, any design issues discovered during a review of the final plans for each plat will be required to be resolved prior to plan approval. The applicant has submitted a preliminary stormwater detention study showing a conceptual layout of detention facilities, a drainage area map, and estimated storage volumes and allowable release rates. The preliminary study is substantially complete and adequate for reviewing the preliminary plat. Although any design issues discovered during the review of the final stormwater detention plan must be resolved prior to acceptance by the city. This development is also subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 1116, Stormwater Treatment, which pertains to the implementation of stormwater treatment facilities to preserve and enhance the quality of stormwater runoff. This development is required to satisfy a minimum level of service of 4 based on the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual, and the applicant is proposing the use of preserved native vegetation, a conveyance swell, and extended dry detention to meet this level of service. Telephone, electric, and cable service facilities shall be placed within the rear and side yards of lots as required by Policy Statement PS 24, except as specifically varied or waived by action of the City Council. Due to the back of the lots being encumbered with extensive gas pipeline and water line easements, the applicant has requested that utilities be located at the front of the lots within an easement. Staff believes this is a reasonable request and is supportive of allowing front yard utilities for the 8 lots within this plat. Utility pedestals shall be screened by landscaping in accordance with the utility box screening detail provided by the applicant. All utilities shall be placed underground. This development is subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 1226, which pertains to the city's excise tax on new subdivision plats. The estimated excise tax for this development is $48,911.09, based on an area of 227,493 square feet at the current rate of 21.5 cents per square foot. The developer may enter into an excise tax abatement agreement with the city that would allow for the suspension, partial or in full, for the full excise tax due. This subdivision is subject to provisions of Shawnee Municipal Code 1214, Park and Recreational Land Use Fund, open space fees in the amount of $400 per residential unit, or $6,400 total, shall be paid prior to issuance of a building permit. As far as staff's recommendation, staff recommends approval of Z-08-18-11 rezoning from AG Agricultural DU Duplex Residential, subject to the following condition: approval of the rezoning by the City Council and publication of the rezoning ordinance as required by state statute. Staff also recommends approval of pre-plat -14-18-11 preliminary plat for Settle Woods, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, acceptance of the dedications on the final plat by the Shawnee governing body and recording of the final plat with the Johnson County Register of Deeds shall be completed prior to issuance of any building permits. Number 2, the plat contains 8 lots and 1 tract on 5.61 acres. Number 3, all bulk and use regulations of the DU zoning district shall be met. 4, a DU zone lot may be split one time upon completion of the duplex unit constructed on the lot for transfer of ownership of each lot in accordance with SMC Chapter 16.16. 5, public street improvements, street lighting system, and storm drainage improvements required for this development shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the standards of the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual and is detailed within the staff report. 6, this development is subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 11.24, stormwater retention, which pertains to the construction and maintenance of on-site stormwater detention facilities. Number 7, this development is subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 11.16 Stormwater Treatment, which pertains to the implementation of stormwater treatment facilities to preserve and enhance the quality of stormwater runoff. This development is required to satisfy a minimum level of service of 4 based on the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual. The applicant is proposing the use of preserved native vegetation, conveyance swale, and extended dry detention to meet this required level of service. And all STFs required for this development shall be designed in accordance with the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual. 8, the applicant is responsible for scheduling a pre-design meeting with the development engineering staff prior to preparing any public improvement plans. Individual sets of final street, storm drainage, and street lighting plans must be submitted to the city for review and approval prior to commencing construction on the site. These plans shall be prepared according to the standards in the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual. Number 9, all public improvements for this development shall be constructed according to the applicable standards in the Shawnee Design and Construction Manual. A public improvement permit will be required for all public street, storm, and street light improvements. 10, this development is subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 11.20 Land Disturbance Activity, which pertains to site grading and erosion control measures. 11, the applicant or landowner is responsible for obtaining a land disturbance permit as required by Codes Administration prior to undertaking any land disturbance or construction activities on the site. 12, all disturbed areas and required front, side, and rear yard areas are required to be sodded in accordance with SMC 17.57. 13, telephone, electric, and cable service facilities shall be placed within rear or side yards of lots as required by Policy Statement PS-24, except as specifically varied or waived by action of the City Council. Utilities may be placed in the front yard within an easement for lots 1 through 8. All utilities shall be placed underground. Number 14, all fire hydrants with compliant fire flows and fire lanes as required by the fire department shall be installed and approved prior to issuance of a building permit. Minimum fire flow and fire duration shall be as specified in Table B 105.1 of the International Fire Code. Fire flow is measured at a 20 psi residual pressure. 15, the provision of the excise tax shall be satisfied prior to the mayor signing the recording copies of the final plat. The developer may enter into a developer's agreement with the city that would allow for the suspension, partial or in full, of the excise tax due, provided the final plat is approved and recorded prior to expiration of the suspension of the excise taxes set by the city. This agreement between the property owner and the city shall be created, agreed upon, and executed prior to obtaining the mayor's signature on the final plat. 16, open space fees in the amount of $400 per residential unit, or $6,400, or the current open space fee rate in effect at the time a building permit is applied for shall be paid prior to the issuance of a building permit as provided by SMC 12.14. And 17, the applicant is responsible for obtaining all such permits as may be required by all federal, state, and local agencies, included but not limited to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Kansas Division of Water Resources, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mark. Is the applicant present? If you'd come forward and state your name and address, please.
Thank you, Commissioners. Judd Clausen, Phelps Engineering, 1270 North Winchester, Olathe, Kansas. I'm here tonight on behalf of Sunshine Development Corporation with my client Randy Dalrymple here in the audience as well. Staff report is very thorough. As you note that there's a existing gas line easement across the top of the page there, kind of set some of the geometry for this, as well as really the reason for that street not going all the way through and ending in a cul-de-sac like we've proposed is because of the existing utilities there on the west side of Monticello, which would really prohibit us from ever making that connection. So with that, I stand for questions. My client is in agreement with all stipulations as presented in the staff report, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for staff or applicant? Commissioner Peterson.
Looking at the detention basin, and I know that it overlaps the back of Lot 2 and minimal on Lot 3, and I understand that that is worst-case scenario, and I realize that if you buy those lots, that will have to be something that you contemplate. Would that ever create a flood zone because you're touching the detention basin, or what is, I'm asking for a little clarification, I guess.
Yeah, those, that's really kind of the grading limits of that basin. The 100-year water surface is down further inside of there, and that's something that we further refined as we get into final design. But the intent is for the 100-year in that basin to be entirely contained within that tract A. Just so you kind of understand a little bit about how the drainage is set up on this, the site all drains to the northeast here.
About 20 feet per lot.
I'm sorry, what?
About 20 feet per lot.
Yeah,
If you
right.
could-
There's a lot of grade fall there.
No, I get it. So
Yeah.
that's why, that was my concern,
And,
was that
we're-
if the detention basin is being structured so that it's adequate, because you're even taking it from the other side of the cul-de-sac with the current, even with the grading plan that I'm looking at.
Right, and there's a set of curb inlets on the street here. The street will come up, back down to a low point, and then back up. And so it'll capture this runoff from this development, taking in a pipe system down here, which is sized for the 100-year. And then runoff from the backyards here will be, we'll have a little low swale with a diversion berm along
Okay.
the side that picks up any runoff off those backyards and diverts it into that basin.
And those diversion berms will be the responsibility of the, whoever buys the plot, or the
Those will be
developer
built
later
as-
on down the way?
Those will be built as part of the original grading for the subdivision
Okay.
along with the street. So they'll be in place and certified prior to being able to get a building permit for it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Commissioner John Smith.
I understand, I think when our staff said that the maintenance of that retention basin will be the responsibility of the homeowners association. Have they agreed to that?
There is none.
I might have you come on up. Brent.
Yes.
I'm gonna
like
let
to
my
hear.
client answer that question about the HOA
If
agreements.
you'd also state your name and address, please, sir.
My name is Randy Dalrymple. My address is 11112 West 177th Terrace, Overland Park. To answer you, Settle Downs, we have been in discussion with them, and they're in agreement that we would join their homes association. They currently have detention in their existing area, and so we would simply include that in. If that makes sense. Yeah, it'll just be, they've already got that in place, and so it's just a continuation.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, at this point in time, this would be the zoning would be subject to public hearing. If anybody from the public wishes to speak on this matter, please come forward. Seeing no one move, then we would be in commission discussion. Since there's a lack of discussion, and I believe in this one, we can do both the zoning and the pre-plat together in one single motion. Commissioner Les Smith.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve Z081811 rezoning from AG to DU and approve preliminary plat for Subtle Woods duplex residential subdivision located in the 7600 block of Monticello Road.
Is there a second? Commissioner John Smith.
I'd second the
It's
Commissioner's
in-
motion.
If I may, to the second, add subject to staff conditions. Sorry.
Thank you. Second still goes.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Certainly.
A motion and a second to approve Z0818-11 and pre-plat 1408-11 rezoning from agriculture to duplex residential and preliminary plat approval for Subtle Woods as duplex residential subdivision located at the 7600 block of Monticello Road. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next on the agenda, would you prefer I read this all out since this was subject to a public hearing? Doug?
It probably wouldn't hurt.
Very
As you
fine.
know, this is just a housekeeping item. The list that was turned in by the applicant, we've discovered a notification error. And so we now have the corrected list, and those letters will be going out to satisfy statutory notification requirements. So we would, if you would just go ahead and
Be
kind of
glad
read
to.
the heading there in the agenda, and then we would need an action, a motion, a second, and then a vote to take it to the December 17th Planning Commission meeting.
December 17th, is that correct?
Correct.
Next on the agenda is actually PUD 0418-11, rezoning from commercial highway to planned unit mixed-use development and preliminary development plan for the approval of construction of a mixed-use project located in the 16100 to 16300 blocks of West 66 Terra. The applicant is filed by BHC Roads for Bach Homes developer. This item was scheduled and notice was published for a public hearing at the November 19, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Part of the statutory requirement for notification also includes mailings to all owners of property within 200 feet of the subject parcels to be considered for rezoning. An error has been discovered in the notification list, which omitted some of the affected property owners from the required mailing. In light of this, re-notification via U.S. mail is required prior to conducting a public hearing on the item. Since there's no applicant, and this is actually a public hearing, should we add that in?
The action that we're doing is actually, since we published it in the newspaper to this date certain, we just need a motion and a second and a vote to table this public hearing to the December 17th meeting.
Thank you, Doug. Would someone care to make the motion? Commissioner Braley.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that public hearing for PUD 041811 rezoning and preliminary development plan be tabled to the December 17th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting so that the statutory mailing requirements can be satisfied.
Is there a second on this motion? Commissioner Montgomery.
I second the motion.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second to table the PUD 0418-11 to the December 17th meeting. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Next is zoning text requirement, SMC 17.51, table of general uses discussion, public hearing to consider zoning text amendments to SMC 17.51, table of general uses. The specific amendment to be considered would allow solid waste transfer stations to only be located within AG agriculture and PI planned industrial zoning districts in the city, and that solid waste transfer stations would be subject to special use permit review and approval in both zones.
Good evening, Doug Allman, planning staff. I had planned on going up there, but the text is so small on this that you're probably better off just to look at the matrix that's in your report. We had a pretty good discussion about this at the early October meeting. There was a flaw discovered in our zoning matrix that actually showed solid waste transfer stations as being permitted by right use in the planned industrial zone. And also, a little bit surprisingly, it was a special use in our professional office, commercial highway, town square, and commercial neighborhood zones. And so we want to clean this up. If you go through the matrix, things like sanitary landfills are permitted by special use permit only in the ag and planned industrial zones. Waste treatment plants, the same. The nuisances that are provided or that come about from those type of uses are generally the same. Problems with odors, noise, impact on the road system. So it's our feeling that a solid waste transfer station is very similar to those type of uses, and so we would recommend that you take this amended table of uses that's shown on the back page. It would essentially take them out of the PO, CN, CH, and town squares districts, make it a special use permit in the PI zone, and the matrix already has it as a special use permit in the ag zone. So with that, we would just recommend that you forward those to council for adoption into our zoning code.
Doug, I have a question for you, and I wasn't at the October meeting, but does this put them under a similar category for as a waste or as a solid waste solid waste facility?
Yes,
same requirements all the way
through.
through.
This would be the same approval process that you would have for a solid waste or sanitary landfill.
Thank you. And as this is a public, as this requires a public hearing, so does anybody from the audience wish to come forward and speak on this matter? Oh, that was good. As no one has come forward, then the public hearing is over, and we would be in commission discussion. Would anyone care to make a motion on this? Commissioner Peterson.
I move that we approve the zoning text amendment for SMC 17.51, Table of General Uses per staff instructions. I need to be more explicit.
Just per the matrix provided.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Willoughby.
I second it.
There's a motion and a second to approve the zoning text amendment, SMC 17.51, Table of General Uses. So the specific amendment to be considered would allow solid waste transfer stations to be only in AG or planned industrial zoning districts, and that solid waste transfer stations would be subject to special use permit and review and approval in both zones. Any further discussion? Commissioner John Smith?
I have a question for staff. Have you checked with other cities? Do they handle this in a similar manner? Or?
We did not check it per cities around us. I'm not aware on the Kansas side right now of any other transfer stations that are, in fact, Olathe had one at one point, but I think it's been closed. Obviously, we're the only sanitary landfill in Johnson County. So what we did is really look through our matrix and see what other similar type uses there are within our city, like waste treatment plants, the sanitary landfill. And we felt like that the nuisance effects of a solid waste transfer station were similar enough that they should be regulated the same.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. At this point in time, does the staff have anything else for the commissioners? Does commissioners have anything else for staff? Commissioner Brayley.
Would be curious to hear from other commissioners and also from staff, but I know that with the recent trip that people made to Des Moines, and then I attended a presentation by the city of Olathe on their 2040 visioning plan. Would there be an opportunity to pull council and commission together again for an open discussion of what we learned, what are we looking for in the future, and kind of do a big brain dump? And
I believe the SCDC is scheduling a meeting, a follow-up meeting for a lessons learned type luncheon for everybody that attended. That's, I think, November 29th, and what I could do is report back a summary of that at our next meeting. December 3rd, I believe, is our next meeting. I'd be glad to do that. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend that meeting because I'm going to be on vacation, but I'm sure that they'll produce minutes from that, and Kathy will be there as well. I'm hoping Kathy will be. I just said that you would be, but Kathy went on the trip with us too. So.
okay. So who is it that will be in attendance for that meeting?
Everybody that went on the trip that can be there is how the invitation went out.
Okay, all right. And then the second thing, and this was a question that I had after attending the presentation from Olathe. Have we ever done a housing study in the city of Shawnee?
I'm not aware of a housing study since I've been here.
Okay.
So no.
It was interesting, that they brought that up as something that's relevant in what they're looking for in the future to understand the existing infrastructure that exists in housing and current demand and future demands. I know we hear up here a lot that people have various opinions on things that we have too much of and not enough of, and really don't know what's involved in that. But again, we were talking about the aging population, where do we position ourselves? And it would, maybe that falls into lessons learned out of Des Moines. But again, looking forward and understanding the present day and the future and where are we positioned for that. I don't know how we would proceed to have a discussion of whether that's a worthwhile endeavor for us.
As a staff, and I've had discussions with the city manager about this, We're looking at updating our comprehensive plan, and in a new updated comprehensive plan, part of that would be a needs assessment, and it more than likely would at some level include a housing needs assessment where you look at the existing stock, the gaps that are in that stock, the price ranges of that housing stock, the condition of that housing stock. And so that is in the future. We're in discussions about how we would budget for that right now. So
Okay.
it is not just something that's a thought. It's something that we're trying to put in motion.
Okay.
Commissioner Beanhoff.
Doug, didn't we have, we got together about 6 months or so ago, maybe 9 months, and the safety center, and somebody presented on kind of in general housing studies?
Yeah, that was a kind of a regional housing trends, market analysis kind of study. A true housing study, I think that Randy's talking about would really dig into the economics of your community. It would dig into the existing housing stock, the age of the housing stock, the availability of affordable housing. There are several parameters in a true housing study that would be addressed and looked at by a consultant.
Yeah, because after the fact, when I was talking to them, they said, at a certain time, a certain generation of housing, what we experienced in the late 80s, early 90s are very two-story, not a lot of ranch, and then you're going to have people that are really going to be looking for ranch-style homes because of the ADA, accessibility, wheelchairs, walkers, those kinds of things. And is that inventory going to meet that need, even though by the numbers, we have lots of single-family homes, but do they necessarily meet the future needs of the population?
Right.
Okay.
Kind of trying to match a housing stock with the market that's out there. And part of that is, you said, hit it on the nail, is that we have an aging population. And so making sure that we have a housing stock that works for them as well.
Commissioner Peterson.
Question for staff. This time of year, or historically, this time of year, we have had some text amendments looking at changing how our wording is on land use guide or general things. Are we, Darlin, with you just coming on board to like steer the ship, are we looking at doing any of those things?
Are you talking about the zoning code or the comprehensive plan?
Some housekeeping on some the new wording for and the new amenities for amenities on multifamily. But the other thing too is I noticed it several but it was in the verbiage, which we were not addressing, it actually said.
That's kind of what I was alluding to with
And
Randy. We're
are
going to be
we-
looking at the comprehensive plan in a new way. Correct, and there'll probably be portions of the entire document that will be completely new, is what we're envisioning, rather than just going into the version that we've had on the shelves for years and years and decades and changing some words here or changing a paragraph here or there. We're talking about a true comprehensive planning exercise. There'll be members of the community would be involved and do a true comprehensive planning exercise. And that's the goal. In terms of some of the amendments, we're required to review our comprehensive plan every year. And we did that, and when we added some mixed-use areas in, and so statutorily we've met that requirement. If there's anything in particular that you're wanting to look at, we can always bring those to you anytime. We just need a month or so to prepare those amendments for your review.
Any other questions for staff or comments for staff? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Commissioner Les Smith.
Move that we adjourn, please.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Second by Commissioner Braley to adjourn. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. We're done. Thank you.